Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila, this is JemilaBeReadin because I do be reading, and today we're going to be doing a December and January wrap up. I realized that I never talked about my December reads. It was a very small number of reads in December. I only read 3 books. And then in January, the majority of the books that I read were for this Goodreads video. So I'm gonna keep it pretty short. And the 2 books that I read in December made it to my favorites. So I also already talked about those books in my favorite books of the year. I'll have both of these videos linked if you want fuller thoughts on any of these books. I'll run through them quickly. But I really only have 2 new books to talk with you guys about today. So let's just get into it. Also, sorry for the mood lighting. It's nighttime. I just got back from work and I was too lazy to set up my ring light. So we're going with a cozy vibe today. We're going for low lighting today. So the first book that I read in December was Mickey Chamber Shakes It Up by Cherish Reed. This is an adult contemporary romance that's following Mickey, who is an adjunct professor at a university, and Diego, who is the owner of this kind of struggling bar in town. Mickey did not receive as many courses as she was hoping to teach during the summer semester, and she's struggling financially, particularly because she is chronically ill and has some pretty expensive medications that she has to keep up with. So she is desperate and looking for another job to tide her over until the full school year begins in the fall. So she ends up getting a position at Diego's bar. Diego is also returning to school. He's going to college, he's older, he's returning to school, and it just so happens that the one course that he's taking is the one being taught by Mickey. So there's a really interesting dynamic going on here. There's some power dynamics that I normally wouldn't like because of the way that they're interplaying with each other and the way that the author handles it. It didn't really bother me. So we have a student-teacher dynamic, but then we also have an employee-boss dynamic. And then on top of that, we have an age gap because Mickey is in her 30s and Diego is in his early 40s. So a lot of interesting things going on. I had a good time reading this one. I think when I first read it, I gave it around a 3.5 stars. But I think now that I'm further away from it, I'd probably knock it down to a 3. I still enjoyed it, and I think if you're someone that's just looking for a nice rom-com to read, I would recommend this one. I think it's kind of, the things that didn't work for me totally was that it's kind of insta-love, insta-lusty, despite all of these factors that would typically keep them away from each other. They are instantly into each other, and there's not a lot holding them back despite, again, all of these different dynamics at play. On top of that, I really didn't like Diego. I think for the most part they had good chemistry, but there were just some moments in here where Diego really kind of pissed me off. He says something kind of misogynistic, and granted, everyone calls him out in the moment, but I just don't think enough was done to show that he changed or that this is just a one-off thing. He's also kind of rude to Mickey sometimes. I didn't really like him, and if it were me, if I was Mickey, I'd be stay the fuck away from me. But alas, I am not Mickey, okay? This is not Jamila Shakes It Up. Anyways, 3 stars. The next book that I read in December was Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. I did talk about this in my favorites video. This was one of my runner-ups, I suppose. This one I gave a 4.25, between a 4.25 and a 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. This is a literary fiction that's following our main character, Sonia. She is an actress, primarily doing stage and theater production. At the start of this book, she's not doing well. She has just gotten out of a relationship. she's really struggling with her sense of self, and she goes to Palestine to visit her sister who lives there, and kind of just like, I don't know, kind of like figure herself out. This really has the like sad girl literary fiction quality about it. The main character is like a little bit messy. There's a lot of things going on and she's just trying to like figure herself out. And you have this extra layer of it being set in Palestine, and Sonia is being confronted with the atrocities that Palestinians are facing. Not that she didn't already know that or even witness it before, because she grew up visiting family in Palestine like during summers when she was a child. But she did live a like relatively privileged life. She grew up in the UK, and you know, she just never really like paid attention to these things. So she's like being confronted with it now. And kind of like what's setting the scene for this story is when she goes to Palestine, she meets her sister's friend who is putting on a production of Hamlet, an Arabic speaking version of Hamlet. And it's very controversial, and they kind of have to sneak around to practice and put this together because it might be seen as subversive or against, you know, Israel and stuff like that. So I just thought it was a really interesting read and like a fascinating perspective to follow. We also get to like hop around around different parts of Palestine, like the West Bank and stuff like that. So I enjoyed this. I think, again, if you're someone that likes sad girl lit fic, if you're a Shakespeare fan or just interested in reading things related to Shakespeare, I would recommend checking this one out. And the final book that I read in December was Chang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is a literary sci-fi dystopian book that's multi-POV, but the story centers on two characters, Loretta Thurwar and Hamara Hurricane Stacker, who are the top stars of Chang All-Stars, which is this television show, this competition that people watch in this dystopian universe. Basically, people who are in prison have the option to join Chang All-Stars if they win enough fights and last for X amount of time. They can win their freedom. But all of their fights are fight to the death. So it's incredibly gruesome, it's incredibly unethical, and really all of this is just meant to discuss the prison industrial complex. It's, I would say, on the nose with its messaging, and I talked about this in my Goodreads video, how I don't necessarily mind when a book is on the nose with its messaging, depending on how it does it. And this book does it really well. Like, you're following so many different perspectives from Hurricane Stacks and Loretta Thurwar. You're following people who watch the show, people who are fans of the show, people who are running the show, people who are protesting against the show. You're following such a wide range of perspectives, and it all comes together to make such an interesting story, and it does it so well. I loved this book a lot. This was in my top 6 books of the year. I gave this 5 stars, and I highly, highly recommend the audiobook for this. There's multiple narrators. It's just fantastic. Okay, and to quickly run you all through the books that I read for that Goodreads video, I talked at length about a lot of these books, so I'm just gonna keep it quick. But I read A Dawn of Onyx by Kate Golden. This is an adult romantasy book. Yeah, give it 2.5 stars. Technically, this is the best romantasy book that I've read, which is not saying much, but I guess I have to give it props for that. I gave it 2.5 stars. I'm interested enough that I might check out the second book in this series, but it really just, I don't know, it felt very devoid of personality. It hit all the beats that it needed to for the subgenre, but I just didn't feel all that much towards it. But you know, we'll see how the second one goes if I get around to reading it. I read Family Meal by Brian Washington. This is like lit fic, contemporary fiction. We're following 3 POVs, and this book is really like an exploration of grief and family, friendship, community, queerness, food. I have such mixed feelings about this book, but I think I liked it. I think I liked it, and I think I mentioned in that video that upon reread, this might get a higher rating, but for right now, I'm giving it a 3.5 stars. Another book that I also gave 3.5 stars was Venco by Sherry Dimmeline. This is theoretically a fantasy book, but I'd really say it's more literary fiction with some fantasy elements. It's following a coven, or a coven that's trying to be formed to protect the world from evil, and all of it's kind of like an allegory for feminism and fighting against misogyny and the patriarchy. And I thought this one was fine. For the most part, I enjoyed the process of reading this book, but I didn't really feel all that much towards it. It was definitely well written, and I like Sherry Dimmeline. I read another book by her that I enjoyed a lot more, but yeah, I was a little bit disappointed. I was hoping for something a little bit more interesting with this book, but like I said, I gave it 3.5 stars. I read Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano, which is a horror book that has a really interesting premise. It's following this sports reporter named Harper, who is going to this very like remote small island off the coast of Wisconsin in search of his missing sister, and her last known whereabouts were this island. She has experienced a lot of grief, and she kind of just happens to end up there for reasons, and so he's searching for her, and he notices that this town is repeating kind of like the same day over and over again. It's very like outdated. Things kind of remind him of the 90s. There's some weird vibes going on here, and it's a really interesting format. So we get like Harper's POV, we get letters from his sister, we get text messages between a resident of this island and her boyfriend, we get like news articles and transcripts. I think it's a really interesting format, and for the most part, I think it came together decently well. I did find the ending to be a bit anticlimactic, and I also don't know that I really understand what this book was trying to say about grief, or like the good old days and like how things used to be better in the past. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But it was interesting, and I was intrigued the whole time that I was reading the book. I gave this one around a 3 stars, and I do know that it is being adapted. I think it got picked up for a movie or maybe a TV show. I'm not really sure, but I think it would work really well on screen. So I would definitely check that out if and when that comes out. And finally, for that video, I read The Maids Diary by Lorith Ann White. This is a mystery thriller. It feels very cookie cutter mystery thriller to me. Like literally one of those books that you pick up, a quick read, and then you never think about it again. It's following a murder question mark. Something has happened. There is a house, there's a lot of blood. The police come, they're trying to figure out like what is going on because there's no body. And so we're following the perspective of a detective who is obviously investigating this crime. And then we're following the perspectives of this maid, who is a maid for the wealthy in this area. We're getting it in the perspective of her like journal or diary entries. And then we're following the perspectives of some other people that are seemingly involved in what's going on, and where all of this is leading up to like figuring out what has happened. And again, it was a very quick read. I was entertained while reading it, and then I'm probably never going to think about it again. I will say that the book handles some topics kind of like not the best in my opinion, particularly around abortion. So it was like not very overt, but like when you think about it, I don't want to spoil I guess what happened in the book, but it is weird and I didn't really like that. But yeah, like 3 stars. I don't know, I'm like never gonna think about this book again, to be honest. So yeah. And the final book that I read in January was for the Pros Before Bros book club. It's a local book club here in Portland for women of color that I'm a part of. Every January we read like a self-help-esque book, which is never usually my favorite because I'm not a self-help type of person. But I will say this was my favorite read of January, which is interesting. And that is Who is Wellness For by Fariha Rosen. This is, I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily even consider this to be self-help, but it's part memoir. Like the author sprinkles in some of her childhood experiences and trauma and her life story in order to talk about wellness and wellness culture. I've heard a lot of people say that this is like mismarketed, and I also kind of think this book was a little bit mismarketed, but when we were talking about it during book club, someone mentioned that it was intentional because the people who need to read this are not the people who would have picked it up knowing like exactly what it was about. So I think a lot of people came into this thinking that this was going to be like a takedown of wellness culture in the same vein as like the podcast maintenance phase. But really what this is that the book is getting to the heart of what causes our wellness culture. And that's white supremacy, colonialism, patriarchy, gender norms, capitalism, all of that stuff. She just jumps straight to the heart of that and kind of uses her experiences and also, you know, pulls from different sources and research and stuff like that. And I just thought it like, this worked so well for me. Honestly, I really liked it. It's incredibly heavy and there's some incredibly triggering content in this book. So as always, I have like Storygraph and booktriggerwarnings.com linked in the description. I really recommend anybody, even if you're someone that doesn't usually find themselves triggered by content, to check it out before reading this book, because there's some like pretty intense stuff that the author discusses in this book. But I highly recommend this. It's so good. And I think this felt so timely. I mean, it was written in the middle of COVID, so that layer feels timely. But I also think just like as we're watching the genocide in Palestine, it feels especially timely because like that is a mass disabling event, and the untold trauma that people are going to be living with and the generational trauma that people's kids will be experiencing and their grandkids and so on and so forth are going to be experiencing because of this, and how that impacts our health and our wellness. Yeah, I recommend this. I recommend this a lot. All right, those are the books that I read in December and January. January was, you know, it was a fine month. I'm hoping February is gonna go better. I can already tell you that it is so far. It is in the middle of February. It's like the first week of February right now when I'm filming this. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to y'all about the books that I'm reading, have read, will be reading in February. And I'll catch y'all in the next video.